Sweetheart, try to keep the dust down. This side of the line is for warriors, not the cleaning crew. The condescending drawl hung in the humid air. She didn't look up, her focus locked on the brass casings glinting on the concrete. The air at Fort Bragg was a thick, suffocating blanket, tasting of pine needles, damp earth, and the sharp, metallic tang of cordite. It was qualification day, a high-stakes ritual where a man's worth was measured in millimeters and careers could be shattered by a single errant twitch. Presiding over this kingdom of controlled explosions was Gunnery Sergeant Gunny Thorne, a man whose personality was as coarse and unforgiving as the gravel under his spit-shine boots. He saw the world in stark, simple terms: assets and liabilities, warriors and everyone else. To him, the woman meticulously sweeping spent 9mm casings into a shimmering brass pile was a liability. Her name on the day's roster was listed simply as E. Rostova, a ghost from the base's vast logistics network. She wore a pair of faded, olive-drab utility coveralls, devoid of rank or insignia, her blonde hair pulled back in a severe, functional bun. She was an anomaly, an unwelcome distraction from the serious business of honing killers. The young Army Rangers, high on a cocktail of adrenaline and arrogant youth, snickered at Thorne's comment. Their laughter was a harsh, ugly sound that bounced off the concrete baffles of the pistol bay. The target of their ridicule, Eva Rostova, didn't flinch. She didn't look up. She didn't offer a single word in her defense. Her focus remained absolute, her hands guiding the heavy push broom with a rhythmic, almost meditative grace. Each stroke was deliberate, efficient, a study in economy of motion. Her silence was a fortress, a bubble of unnerving calm in a sea of casual contempt. From the observation tower overlooking the range, a visiting full-bird colonel, a man named Bishop, watched the scene unfold. His eyes, accustomed to seeing the details others missed, narrowed slightly. He didn't see a janitor. He saw the ramrod straightness of her posture, a discipline that screamed of years of training. He saw the subtle, constant swivel of her head, her eyes subconsciously scanning the environment, assessing angles and exits. He saw a level of situational awareness that couldn't be drilled into a soldier at basic training. It had to be forged in fire. Thorne, oblivious to the colonel's scrutiny, continued his sermon, his voice booming across the bay for all to hear. "The modern army is getting soft," he declared, gesturing vaguely in Eva's direction. "We're letting standards slip, forgetting that our primary job is to be the apex predator on the battlefield. You can't do that if you're more comfortable with a broom than a SIG." The recruits nodded along, their faces masks of eager agreement, desperate for the approval of the grizzled Gunny. Yet Eva remained a statue of serene focus. Her world had shrunk to the simple, clean lines of her work. The insults were just noise, like the distant pop-pop-pop of a rifle from another range. Irrelevant data, filtered and discarded. Her every movement was economical, betraying a deep-seated efficiency that was completely at odds with the menial task she performed. Her silence wasn't weakness. It was the profound calm of a professional who knew her worth with such unshakable certainty that the opinions of amateurs were less than meaningless. The final relay for qualification was called to the line. A nervous private, his face slick with sweat, fumbled his weapon clearance check. A sharp, public rebuke from Thorne sent the young man slinking away in shame, leaving an open spot on firing lane 4. A moment of opportunity, pregnant with possibility, hung in the oppressive heat. Then, Colonel Bishop's voice crackled over the PA system from the tower, clear and authoritative, cutting through the low murmur of the range. "Gunny, we have an empty lane. Fill it." A pause. "Rostova, you're up." A wave of confused murmurs washed over the recruits. They looked from the woman with the broom to the tower and back again. Gunnery Sergeant Thorne's face contorted in a mask of pure disbelief, a sarcastic protest already forming on his lips. "Sir, with all due respect," he began, his voice dripping with condescension. "She's logistics personnel, not a designated shooter. This is a qualification course for her." He never finished the sentence. From the tower, Colonel Bishop didn't say a word. He simply raised his binoculars, the lenses glinting in the sun, and fixed them directly on Thorn. The message was unmistakable, a silent, crushing weight of command. The gunny's objection vaporized in his throat. His face paled. "Understood, sir," was all he could manage, the words tight and strained. With meticulous care, as if it were a ceremonial rifle, Eva placed the broom against the wall. She walked to the firing line with an unhurried, deliberate pace that drew every eye. The swaggering confidence of the young rangers faltered, replaced by a confused curiosity. She moved with a purpose that felt alien to her supposed station. She approached the bench and picked up the standard issue SIG Sauer M17. Her hands moved over the weapon with a fluid familiarity that was both startling and deeply impressive. There was no flashy, theatrical check of the sights, no nervous adjustment of her grip. She simply acquired the weapon, her body flowing into a perfect, modified Weaver stance, a textbook illustration of stability and controlled aggression. In that single, fluid motion, she was transformed. She was no longer the janitor. She was a weapon system coming online, and the very air on the range seemed to grow heavy with anticipation. The timer buzzer shrieked, a violent, electronic sound that ripped through the tense silence. What happened next was not an action, but a revelation. It was over before most of the onlookers' brains could fully process the image. Her hand didn't just draw the pistol. It was a flicker, a teleportation event. The movement was a single, fluid arc of such violent economy that it defied belief. There was no wasted motion, no hesitation, no sign of thought. Only pure, refined instinct. The M17 seemed to leap from the holster into her grip, leveled and sighted in a sliver of a second that felt like an eternity. Crack, crack. 2 shots rang out. The reports were so close together, they sounded like a single, emphatic syllable of thunder. It wasn't the sound of 2 bullets being fired. It was the sound of a problem being solved. Then, a silence more profound and deafening than the shots themselves fell over the range. Every head, every pair of eyes, swiveled from the silent, smoking figure of Eva Rostova to the paper target 50 feet downrange. The result was not just good. It was impossible. It was an insult to the laws of physics and probability. Dead center in the black X-ring were 2 holes. It wasn't a grouping. It was a single, ragged figure 8, a tiny cloverleaf punched through the paper with surgical precision. It was a flawless controlled pair, the kind of mythical shot that grizzled instructors spoke of in hushed, reverent tones, but rarely, if ever, witnessed in person. Gunnery Sergeant Thorn's jaw hung open. His face, normally a mask of leathery confidence, was now a canvas of pure, unadulterated shock. His authority, his arrogance, his entire black and white worldview had just been vaporized by 2 small pieces of lead traveling at over 1,000 feet per second. "No," he whispered, the word a faint puff of air. That's not possible." The recruits were frozen, their earlier mockery replaced by a mixture of awe and a dawning, chilling fear. They hadn't just seen good shooting. They had seen something that didn't belong in their world. They had witnessed perfection, and it was terrifying. Colonel Bishop descended from the tower, his boots crunching on the gravel with a steady, purposeful rhythm. He bypassed the dumbstruck recruits and the paralyzed gunnery sergeant, his focus solely on the woman at firing lane 4. Eva was already in the process of unloading and clearing her weapon. Her movements were methodical, precise, and completely devoid of emotion, as if she had just completed a simple administrative task like filing a form. She placed the cleared M17 back on the bench, her expression as placid as a calm lake. The colonel stopped beside her, not addressing her at first. He turned his gaze upon Thorn, and his voice was low, yet it carried the unmistakable weight of command that could freeze battalions in their tracks. "Gunnery Sergeant," he began, his tone glacial. "Access the active personnel roster. Pull up the file for Rostova. Eva. Authorization code. Paladin actual. A collective, sharp intake of breath went through the few senior NCOs present who recognized the call sign. Paladin. It wasn't a standard Army designator. It was a key to a different world, an encrypted designator for the highest echelons of the Joint Special Operations Command, JSOC. Thorne, his face now ashen, fumbled with his data pad, his hands shaking so badly he could barely type. This was no longer about a range qualification. He had blundered into something far, far above his pay grade, and a cold dread, heavy and suffocating, settled in his gut. The quiet woman with the broom was not who she seemed, and he was about to find out exactly how catastrophically wrong he had been. The data scrolled onto the screen, and the blood drained from Thorne's face, leaving it a sickly, waxy gray. The file that loaded was not that of a junior logistics specialist. It was a ghost file, heavily redacted, accessible only by a select few. Each line was a hammer blow to the foundations of Thorne's arrogance. Name, Rostova, Eva. Rank, Chief Warrant Officer 4, CWO4. Unit, Joint Special Operations Command, JSOC. Classified, Primary Billet. Operator, Direct Action Element. Secondary MOS, Master Weapons Instructor, CQB Division. Awards/notes. Recipient, Distinguished Marksman Badge, X3. 3-time undefeated champion. Inter-service pistol competition. Further entries redacted. Top secret/SCI. The list went on. A litany of elite qualifications and classified accomplishments that painted a picture not of a shooter, but of a master of the craft. One of the most lethal individuals in the entire United States Armed Forces. The colonel turned back to Eva, who now stood at a relaxed parade rest. He didn't speak. He simply brought his right hand up in a slow, perfect, achingly respectful salute. "Ma'am," he said, his voice ringing with a reverence that echoed across the now silent range. "My apologies for the interruption to your duties. Please carry on." The story of the Paladin double tap became legend before the sun had even set. It didn't just spread, it detonated. It raced through the barracks, was whispered in the mess halls, and became the central topic of conversation in the smoky back rooms of the NCO club. They stopped calling it Firing Lane 4. It became Eva's Corner, a piece of hallowed ground where young rangers would stand, trying to emulate the impossible serenity of her stance, the ghost of her perfect draw. Gunnery Sergeant Thorne underwent a profound and public transformation. The swagger was gone, replaced by a quiet, watchful humility. The next morning, long before the first relay of shooters arrived, Thorne was out on the range, alone, with a push broom. He swept the entire bay, from the firing line to the back wall, with the same meticulous care Eva had shown. It was a silent, solitary act of penance, a ritual of atonement witnessed only by the rising sun. Later that day, he found her supervising a weapons maintenance class for a new platoon. He approached not with the bluster of a superior, but with the quiet deference of a student seeking a master. His knuckles were white. "Ma'am," he began, his voice tight with a sincerity that was almost painful. "I was ignorant. I was unprofessional. And I was wrong." He swallowed hard. "If you have a moment, I would be honored if you could show me the mechanics of your holster clearance. The way you control the can of your wrist." He had asked for a lesson, but what he was truly asking for was forgiveness. Eva Rostova, or rather, Warrant Officer Rostova, simply gave a short, affirmative nod. There was no lecture. There were no recriminations, no satisfying, "I told you so." Her vindication was not in his humiliation, but in his education. She understood that true strength builds others up. It does not tear them down. She took him to an empty corner of the armory, away from the prying eyes of the platoon, and began her instruction. Her words were as economical and precise as her shooting. "Your elbow is the pivot. Keep it tight to your body. The motion isn't from the shoulder. It's a rotation from your core. Smooth is fast. Don't rush the weapon. Let it come to you." She wasn't a legend basking in her own glory. She was a master craftsman passing on the secrets of the trade. Her professionalism was absolute, her dedication unwavering. The proof of her skill was not in the story being told about her. but in her commitment to the art itself. Months bled into a year. A new class of young, eager Rangers stood on the firing line at Fort Bragg. A cocky private, fresh from a privileged background, made a condescending remark to a female soldier next to him who was struggling with her grip. "Don't worry, sweetheart, you'll get the hang of it eventually." Before the words had fully left his mouth, Gunnery Sergeant Thorne was beside him. The old Thorne would have screamed, unleashing a torrent of abuse. The new Thorne was a different man. His voice was low, calm, and carried a weight the private had never heard before. Thorne didn't look at the private. He simply gestured with his chin towards the range control tower. Mounted inside the window for all to see was a framed target with a small, ragged figure 8 in the center. A polished brass plaque was affixed beneath it. "You see that target, Private?" Thorne asked quietly. A chief warrant officer made those 2 holes with this same model of pistol. When she first arrived here on a quiet assignment, she was sweeping this very deck. I called her janitor. He paused, letting the silence hang heavy in the air. She never said a word back to me. She just did her work. Then she did that. He finally turned to look the private in the eye. "She taught me, and now I'm teaching you. The most dangerous person on this range is never the one making the most noise. Let your skill do the talking for you." The lesson had become doctrine. Eva's quiet competence had been woven into the institution's DNA, a living parable of respect. True strength is never loud. It does not need to boast of its power or broadcast its credentials. It is forged in the deafening silence of 1,000 unseen hours of practice, etched into muscle memory through relentless discipline. It lives in the calm, steady hands of the quiet professional, the one who has faced the crucible and emerged with no need for validation from the crowd. Their worth is not measured in medals or praise, but in their unwavering competence and the moral clarity of their actions. This is the essence of legacy, not a story you leave behind, but a standard that moves forward, embodied by those you teach. It is the profound and unshakable understanding that what you do will always echo with far greater force than anything you could ever say. The quiet ones are not quiet because they have nothing to say. They're quiet because they don't need to. If you believe that true strength is proven through action, type "proven" in the comments below. If you have a story about a quiet professional who let their skills do the talking, share it with us. Let's all comment respect. And for more stories where quiet competence triumphs over loud ignorance, make sure you subscribe.